All right. Because I forgot to record yesterday, I am going to slowly go through these slides for our at-home viewers and allow you guys a few seconds to catch up. Those of you listening to me, I'm going to slowly go through. You're going to have to pause. Sorry about that, but I forgot to record this yesterday. All right. Let's settle down a bit, people. Hey, really quickly, even though, thank you, no one had a hat on in this class, just for your future reference, I don't let people wear hats in my classroom. So what happens is I ask you to take it off and I give you 2 gold pride bucks. I've never allowed hats in my classroom. People that have had me instantaneously take it off when they walk in the room. They don't even think about it just because they know I don't like hats. So I always pay you 2 gold pride bucks for not wearing it. I just dislike hats in a building very much. If there was a dress-up day I would love to get rid of, it would be hat day. I just don't like hats in a building. So I didn't have to ask anyone, so thank you for not wearing a hat today. So, and I don't prevent you from wearing your hat out when you leave my classroom, just not in the classroom. All right, so this is where we left off, talking about Egyptian history divided into 3 parts: the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And so today we're going to go through each one of these kingdoms and prepare for our assignment that you guys will be working on tomorrow. The assignment is not due tomorrow. It will be due, I think I have it due on Thursday, just to give you a day to ask questions when you come back. But no, on Thursday, we're moving on to the next assignment. So I try to give you a day to come back and ask questions. As you know, you can always email me and ask me questions. I'm sitting right here, but sometimes that works well if you got an easy question. But if something doesn't make sense to you, I give you a day to come back and ask about it. So we're going to start with the Old Kingdom first. And I'm giving you the dates of the Old Kingdom. Your assignment asks for the dates of each one of these time periods, but you are not required to memorize nor to know any of these dates. As I said yesterday, I don't even think I ask a question about what order, like we did in our last chapter, Paleolithic, Ice Age, Neolithic, Bronze. I don't even ask you to put these in order because you should be able to put old, middle, new in order without knowing them. But you do have to know which each one is particularly important for. And the Old Kingdom is important for a couple of reasons. And the first one is this is the time the Egyptian rulers become known as pharaohs. So this is when we pick up that word pharaoh. It's also important to know that pharaoh is gender neutral. There's not a pharaohess. There's not a female name for pharaoh. A pharaoh is a pharaoh. And the word pharaoh means great house or palace. And this is where rulers become pharaohs. And the important part of that is that second or that fourth bullet point. Pharaohs had absolute power, meaning they did not have any kind of governmental entity that assisted them in making rules. They had absolute power. Once they made a decision, they didn't have to okay it with anyone. It was their decision. Second part of that is they owned all the land. All the land in Egypt belonged to the pharaoh, no questions asked. And during this time, the pharaoh, because all the land belonged to the pharaoh, had to create this huge bureaucracy to run all of this land. So a bureaucracy is very simply an organization of officials to help run the kingdom. So I got this big, gigantic kingdom that I have to run, But I, as the Pharaoh, do not want to work that hard. Not going to work that hard. So I have someone else do it for me. And I have a steward, better known as a vizier. And a vizier is the same thing that Jafar was in Aladdin. And the steward, which is in charge of the whole land, held the most important position next to the Pharaoh. Are any of your family members of a union? Anybody have union members in their family? When we talk about unions and in positions of their employment, there's always a union steward who is in charge of the union and that place of business. It's the very same thing as this vizier. The vizier is going to head the bureaucracy, and he reports directly to the Pharaoh. So all these 42 governors are going to report to the vizier, and the vizier reports to the Pharaoh. So that vizier can be someone very loyal and honest in helping the Pharaoh, because that vizier has all the information about what's happening in all those provinces. Or the vizier can be very corrupt and withhold information, economic information, money, any of those things that is important for the vizier. The vizier is the second most powerful person in our kingdom, only followed by the Pharaoh. So that sets up the old kingdom with the pharaohs and how Egypt's going to be established. The second most important thing about the old kingdom is this is when we start building pyramids. So a pyramid is a tomb. That's where a pharaoh is going to be buried. It takes about 40 years to complete a tomb. So basically about the time that you're born into this family, we would start building a tomb for you because they took such an extended period of time. First, you should know again that pyramids are not hollow. There's usually 3 rooms, sometimes 4 rooms, but these are solid buildings, and which is one of the reasons why they sink and why a lot of them have been lost to the desert, because as you can think about these solid, heavy objects sitting in shifting sand and just sand blowing up on top of them. But they serve as tombs for the pharaohs and their families. The 3 rooms that are usually always there are the king's room, the queen's room, and a gallery. And that gallery is what holds art, weapons, food, household items, all of the stuff necessary for them to begin their life after death. The king's room, the pharaoh's room makes sense. The queen's room makes sense. Every now and then they're in the old, are you all right, Chelsea? Okay. Parker's whipping her hair back in Chelsea's face. Okay, sorry. I get amused by things. Sorry. So at the beginning of the Old Kingdom, one of the things that was also necessary for you in the afterlife would have been servants. There were several pyramids at the beginning of the Old Kingdom where live servants willingly jumped into this pyramid, sealed themselves up in these rooms with the intent of surviving into the afterlife to serve the Pharaoh. When we get finished, we're going to look at the mummification process. But these are also our first groups of people that will mummify pharaohs. And the reason for the mummification is to preserve the physical body. So Egyptians believed 2 things, that you had a spirit inside of your body, but that spirit needed a body. Like it wouldn't leave and haunt things. It had to stay in a physical body. So they needed to preserve the physical body so your spirit, your ka, could stay inside. And so they did this and developed this through this process called mummification. And we're going to look at that when we're done here. It's all with just pictures. There's no like real things, those of you that are squeamish. Lastly, we've got the largest pyramid built ever in Egypt, was built during the Old Kingdom for King Khufu, which was built in 2540 BCE in Giza. It's 13 acres. And we have these stones that are fitted so closely that a hair cannot pass between them. This is well designed, well built, and well engineered building activity. The Great Sphinx, that big lion head, building that was also built during the Old Kingdom at Giza, in with this Valley of the Kings area. And for our purposes, again, what we will need to know is, why did the Old Kingdom decline? If this kingdom was so awesome and did all these great things, why did it collapse? And the Old Kingdom collapses because resources, manpower, and money were directed at building projects instead of growing food. So the Pharaoh, in an effort to glorify both himself and the kingdom, decided to build things instead of grow things. That's very simple. It's a very simple reason. And if you don't grow things in a desert, and you don't continue to grow things regularly in a desert, your civilization is going to decline. And when, as a kingdom, empire, nation, country, you can't feed the people in your country and you have to seek out food from other places, you have put yourself in a very dangerous situation that you can't afford to feed your own people. The other important part, I'm going to go back up to the building of the pyramids, because this is something, again, that's recently changed within the last 20 years. And eventually, one of your Bell questions asks you to read about the building of pyramids. And in our discussion, you'll see why I wanted to talk with you before you actually read that. These pyramids are built with precision. The stones are cut to the precise sizes time and time again, put on some kind of flatboat, floated down the Nile River, loaded, and then built. The history over time of surrounding pyramids is that work, because it was so labor intensive, so manually heavy, that it had to have been work done by slaves. People wouldn't have voluntarily wanted to do this type of work. About 20 years ago, in and around one group of pyramids, archaeologists found a community of buildings which resembled some kind of living community. And the thought process now is that was like a company construction town, that instead of slaves building the pyramids, that this was really like a well-engineered construction site. And the people that worked there, instead of being people that you thought didn't like to work or take pride in their work, were quite the opposite. These were skilled constructionists. They were skilled craftsmen that built these pyramids, again, so closely that a hair can't be pushed between them. And if we start to think about this logically, and I like to use logic to understand things, and I'm going to take my chores in my life as a kid. My dad had chores that we had to do, and my mom had chores that we had to do. My mom, if I goofed off enough, or my chore, we had nightly chores that we had to do. I had to do dishes and clean the kitchen every night since I've been in the 5th grade with my family. And then throughout the week, we had additional chores like scrubbing the toilets, that kind of stuff. One of mine was to dust my mom's porcelain bird collection. There was about 25 of them. I had to take every single one of them off the shelf, and then I had to put them all back on the shelf. I hated that job so much because it was hard to dust, because there was all these little nooks and crannies. I had to take them all off. She wanted them all back on in a certain spot. I hated these birds horrifically. If I pretended to be clumsy and like I was going to break one of them, my mom would take over the job. And so I couldn't do it all the time because my mom was smart. But enough of the time I would do that so that, thank you, Dane. I don't let you wear hats. Thank you, Dane. I'll give you 2 gold Pride bucks for it when I get finished. So with my mom, if I pretended like I didn't know how to do the job well, she would take it over and do it for me. My dad was of a person, you were going to do the job till you did it right. So with my dad, if I didn't do it right, I was just going to keep on doing it again. And also, my dad had the ever-growing list of things to do when you got finished. So if you worked well and efficient with my dad, you were just going to get new jobs until it was no longer daylight or he was ready to go to bed. He just continually had, okay, now you can go do this. Now you can go do that. So for my dad, I did the job right, but I did it really slow. So if you're a slave and at the end of a job, all that's going to happen to you is you're going to get more jobs, do you do the job well? Do you do the job fast? Do you do the job with any great sense of pride in what you're doing? Probably not. Probably not at all. And so we've really, as historians find more, we've really had to rethink that idea of slave labor building these pyramids, which I tend to follow once they've found this community, thinking, yeah, that really makes more sense than putting slaves into doing work that they don't benefit from. As a slave, I'm not benefiting from it. I'm not getting paid. I just have more work at the end of the day if I go fast. So something else new to think about. Our next kingdom, Middle Kingdom. And above the Middle Kingdom, in your own little cute handwriting, I would write Golden Age, because this is a significant time period in the history of Egypt. And when we start to study more civilizations, each time we study a civilization, we're going to focus on their golden age. So our study of a civilization now looks like, how did it begin? When is it at its top, its golden age, and how does it crash down? We'll look at that for now. Each civilization, we'll look at that for China, we'll look at that for India, we'll look at that for Greece, for Rome, as we move into Europe. How did this civilization begin? What's its time period when it's at its top or its golden age, and how does it come crashing down? So, hi, Gabe.
Sorry, I was taking a bit.
Okay, that's no problem. So, this is a golden age. What does it mean to be a golden age? It means the civilization is at its finest. It's safe. Its peoples are well fed. They are able to produce either great wealth or great art, and they are not worried about being invaded, and they got enough food to eat. It's a golden age. Every civilization has a golden age, and every civilization has a crash that it comes down upon. So during the Middle Kingdom's golden age, they expand into Nubia, they trade with Mesopotamia and Crete. One of the things, again, that's important, and I hope that some of you are asking these questions in your head, I would hope. How do we know they traded with Mesopotamia? Obviously, we have written records. Do I have any soil judging people in here? I always ask this. It's soil that they use to make pottery. That's how we know. We find pottery shards in and around Egypt. We look at the soil. We study the soil with some microscopic computer that looks, or microscope that can analyze soil, and we know exactly where that soil's from. If you guys don't know, I certainly am not anywhere close to understanding that. But two things I know about dirt. One, you can make a lot of money studying dirt. And two, every piece of dirt in this world can be pinpointed to the exact place where it came from, which I find utterly, totally fascinating. Fascinating. So that's how we know that they traded with Mesopotamia and Crete from pottery shards and dirt. The image of the pharaoh shifts during this time. So instead of being this pharaoh that sits up high and has absolute control over his people, the pharaoh now comes down off of the perch, and now he or she is a shepherd of the people. It's my job to take care of my flock, to make sure everyone's taken care of. I have to be concerned for the welfare of my citizens. So in doing that, I have to make sure that my kingdom is at its best. So instead of building pyramids, I'm now building public works. And those public works, again, would be roads, would be canals, would be irrigation systems. And one of the things that these pharaohs are going to look at is draining in and around the Nile Delta, swampy areas, and draining it for farming. Anything I can do to increase my productivity of wheat, I'm going to do that. The second thing I'm going to do to increase my productivity is I'm going to dig a canal between the Red Sea and the Nile River. And when I dig that canal, I will have fresh irrigation water. And in doing creating that irrigation water with the Nile, I again will make it easier for me to profit and my people to profit from farming. This is our only kingdom that really ends with a real true invasion. The Middle Kingdom ends with an invasion of the Isuko people from Western Asia, and this will be where they learn bronze. So even in their invasion, they still get a positive. They get bronze, and they also get horse-drawn chariots that we think about when we think about Egypt, that those were parts of Egypt. And so lastly, we get our new kingdom, and that should be BCE. We're not jumping all the way to 1567. But 1567 to 1085 BCE, a new empire is created, and this is the new kingdom. This kingdom, I would draw dollar signs on this slide, is wealthy. This is what separates the new kingdom from the old and the middle. It's wealth. This kingdom is very, very wealthy. Pharaohs are tremendously wealthy. Their kingdom is large. This time it's going to go all the way up to the Euphrates River up by Mesopotamia. And we will have our first female pharaoh, who is Hatshepsut, or as I just like to call her, Pharaoh Hat. She is the first female, and so she feels like she has a need to present herself as more masculine. So this is a weird thing. She's not trying to trick people into thinking that she's a man. She is not the first transgender. She's not the first to wear men's clothing, but she wears fake beard. She wears a great, big, giant fake beard. And some of you have probably seen images of Pharaoh Hatshepsut and thought that it was a dude, because it's just this big, giant, square beard. And you can always tell that it's her because the little things that hook around her ears are very visible. She doesn't try to hide or conceal. She doesn't try to come across as manly. She just wears the beard as kind of like a sign of wisdom, and the fact that she's the first female. She's going to build her temple near Thebes. And then we'll get our first look at trying to bring Egypt into a monotheistic, and meaning worshiping only one God. And this is the sun god. And this is not going to go very well. Many believe that this is going to upset the cosmic order, destroy Egypt. There's no way. There's only one God. And the way that this is presented and the way that people understand this is there's so much stuff in the world. There are so many things, rain and sunrise and sunset and the moon and flooding and fertility. And there's just the people are convinced there's no way one God could do this. In essence, it's a job too big for one person. Being God of the world is too big, and not one person can do that. That's the belief system. And so King Tut will restore the old gods of polytheism. That, again, is one of the reasons that King Tut is so well remembered. The secondary part, obviously, is this idea that he was a boy king and dies rather abruptly. Again, history always led us to believe that he was somehow assassinated or taken down, and now we know he just died from a broken leg from a chariot race. I think because we have advanced so far medically, we don't quite get that broken bones can be very dangerous, and if not taken care of medically appropriately, can result in death, because a broken bone releases bone marrow. It's releasing blood into your body. And if it's not fixed, you get sepsis, a blood poisoning type of thing. And that's how King Tut dies. He dies of that. We find that out after running him through an MRI and kind of destroys all these stories about assassinations and things. But after King Tut, we'll have Ramses II, and he will regain part of that empire. And then lastly, we will have more invasions. One of the things that's important when we talk about Egypt is they never feel a necessity to protect themselves. They always feel those geographic barriers that we mentioned way back at the beginning protected them. And so they never really invested in the idea of perfection. They never really created large armies to protect themselves. They always just responded to invasions. So they will be invaded by the Assyrians, by the Persians, by the Greeks, and the new kingdom will collapse in 1085. For the next 1,000 years, Libyans, Nubians, Persians, Macedonians are going to dominate Egypt. Cleopatra VII, and this again is always something that shocks people. Cleopatra VII is the Cleopatra that you guys know with Mark Antony, supposedly committed suicide by having a snake bit her. That's the Cleopatra, but she's number 7. And mostly she's number 7 because one of the things that we don't get in depth with Egyptology is most of these people are marrying like their brothers and their sisters. Because if you're a pharaoh and you're a god on earth, there's not a lot of other options of people that you can marry, right? If you're a god on earth, you got to marry another god on earth, and there's not a lot of them roaming around. Her alliance is going to end with Rome when she is defeated by Augustus, and then he will set up the first emperor of Rome. All right, questions about that? All right, we're going to look. Michaela, would you go flip those lights for me really quickly? We're going to look at our mummification process, if I can find it. All right, so to load up. While this is loading up, a couple of things I want you to think about as we go through this mummification process. The time that they spent, number one, focusing on this dead body, the loving care that they gave to this dead body, and the belief systems that generated these customs around this dead body. You're not going to see any dead bodies. Again, they're all drawn out. This is probably the closest thing you see to a dead body. Early Egyptians just buried their dead in pits, and they actually became dehydrated, dried up like you would like an apricot or dried fruit, right? The sun just sucked. This is the grossest thing. That's a real person. Later, Egyptians began to bury their dead in coffins to protect them from wild animals. However, they realized in the coffins, they decayed, and the reason they don't want the decay is that your body needs to be preserved so your spirit can go back in. And so that's what they need to do. They need to develop a system to preserve bodies. And so this begins the story of mummification. So our first step is embalming. So, and notice again that what long this takes and how much care is taken with this body. So first the body's taken to a tent for the place of purification. And there the embalmers are going to wash the body with palm wine and water from the Nile. Again, important, it's water from the Nile. That's this restoration, this restoring. And we'll get that when we get to a few of the stories of their gods. So their body will be laid out. Notice how well they've got this drain, the water drains. The system is well created to take care of this body in the process. Then the next part that is always interesting is these Egyptians knew that they needed to make cuts on the left side of the body. You don't have as many organs on your left side. So they're going to cut on the left side and then start taking out the internal organs, because that's what makes bodies stink. That's what decomposes. That's what makes raccoons puff up on the side of the road. So they take out the liver, the lungs, the stomach, the intestines, they're washed. So these people are taking out body parts, washing them down, and packing them with natron, which is salt. So they're going to pack them with salt. They don't take out the heart because they believe that the heart is where the intelligence and the feeling of a man is, and you need that in your afterlife. This one, if you're really squeamish, this might be a little bit gross, but it's still just a drawing. The next thing they do is stick a hook up, smash your brain, and pull it out through your nose. So your brain is out. Yeah, that one sometimes is kind of gross. All right. Oh, this is hidden down here. Hold on a second. Next. All right, so next, the body is covered and stuffed with salt again. So in that cavity hole, they shove that with salt to dry it inside. They'll sometimes stick rags or sawdust in there, and then they just cover your whole body with salt. So eventually this whole body is going to be covered. Notice again the type of table that that person is on so they can get salt underneath the body. And then they will do that. Oh, God, I got to keep moving this thing over. What's this? Oh, maybe I can hide that. Oh, yeah, I can hide that. Okay. 40 days. So that body lays in salt for 40 days. Then it will be washed again with water from the Nile, and then covered with oils. So this person has been dead at least 40 days, and you're rubbing oil all over this body. Dehydrated organs are then taken out of the body, wrapped in linen, and then stuffed back in. The body is stuffed with any other dry materials to make the chest expand so it looks lifelike. And then finally, the body is covered again with good-smelling oils, and it's ready to be wrapped in linen. These jars become every now and then really popular with decorators, like decorating. And I can never, anytime I see these out, or I see these, like maybe about 15 years ago, Pier 1 had these out, and I'm like, oh, these are so gross, because these are the jars that they stored the organs in. In the past, when the organs were removed, instead of sticking them back in the body, they would stick them in these jars. And so the human head would have the liver, the baboon had the lungs, the jackal had the stomach, and the falcon head looked after the intestines. If you look probably in places like, I don't even know if Pier 1 is in business anymore, but any place like that, you can find these jars. I don't know why anybody would want them once they knew they were to hold organs. They look cool, but ugh, gross. Okay, now the body's clean, dried, rubbed, and now it's ready to wrap. This again takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication by these people handling dead bodies. So there's where the organs were removed and stuffed back in. First, the head and neck are wrapped, and then each finger and toe is wrapped individually. So they don't just wrap the hands, each finger. And usually I have students say, how's anybody going to know this? Like, why would they just not wrap it all up? Because it's going to go inside a coffin. This is a pharaoh. This is someone who these people that are doing this takes really good care of. The second question a lot of people ask are these people like servants, or are they people of high character? They're both. So some of the people that are actually doing some of the lesser work, they're servants. The other ones overseeing it are people of noble birth or in close connection with the pharaoh to make sure he is cared for properly. Arms and legs are wrapped separately. Between the layers of wrapping, the embalmers place amulets, and these amulets are to protect from evil spirits or to help find its way into the next journey. So the Isis knot protects the body, and we'll hear more about Isis. And then this plummet is a balancing, like to keep your life balanced as you move into your next life. priest, this is the priest back here, is going to read spells out loud while the mummy is being wrapped. And these are spells to ward off evil spirits and help the deceased find their way into the afterlife. Arms and legs are tied up together. A papyrus scroll, and that's paper, with spells. Those same spells are placed between the wrapped hands, so to make it look like you're holding it. More linen straps are wrapped around the body. At every layer, the bandages are painted with liquid resin, and resin is like a sap, like from a tree, that resembles glue to hold all that together. Then finally, a cloth is wrapped around the body, and then a picture of the god Osiris is painted on the surface. So they all have that god painted on the surface of all of that. And then another large cloth is wrapped around the entire mummy, strips of linen tied from that, top to bottom, all and around the middle. And then a board of painted wood is placed on top of the mummy, and then the mummy is lowered into one coffin, not the sarcophagus yet, but just a regular old coffin. And then they will be put inside of a second coffin. A funeral is then held for the deceased, and his family mourns his death. And then quite possibly the strangest part of this whole thing is done. A ritual called opening of the mouth is performed, allowing the deceased to eat and drink again. So a priestess, this is the priestess with the jackal head, holds up this mummy and they pretend to feed it so that it knows how to eat when it gets to the afterlife. Finally, the body and its coffin are placed inside a large stone sarcophagus. And that's the thing that we know, that really pretty outside coffin. Furniture, clothing, valuable objects are arranged in the tomb for the deceased. And now his body is ready for the journey to the underworld, where his heart will be judged by his good deeds on earth. And if his heart is bound to be pure, he will live for eternity in the beautiful field of reeds. And that is how long it takes to get a mummy, a very long time of care. So your assignment looks like this. Oh, don't do that. Stop. Okay. You are looking at 3 kingdoms of Egypt. And when we look at this, you are to... and you guys should have up here a submit button that you can submit this from your Google Drive and not have to go back to Canvas to submit it, kind of like Cami. All right, so you're being asked to fill in a chart about the 3 periods of ancient Egypt, very similar to what we did with the Neolithic and Paleolithic. The dates of each, the government of each, important rulers. There are no important rulers of the ancient pyramid. You also do not have to make a copy of this. You should be able to type right on this without having to make a copy. Achievements of each kingdom, and most importantly, the causes of the decline for each one of them. The most important part of this is the writing assignment. You are the Pharaoh's vizier, and the Pharaoh says to you, I don't know why my kingdom is declining. Oh, wise vizier, can you help me out? So you're going to choose one of these kingdoms to write about, that you're the vizier of the old kingdom, middle kingdom, or new kingdom. And you have to tell the vizier what's happening. You have to tell the Pharaoh what's happening. So because you do not want to die or lose your life, you have to make sure that the Pharaoh feels like he's important, and that you recognize all the great things that he's done before you slam him with all the bad things. You need 2 paragraphs. That's your first paragraph. O great wise Pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom, you are so awesome. You have brought us into our golden age. That needs to be 4 or 5 good sentences about how awesome the Middle Kingdom is. Then you got to slowly transition or segue into, but Pharaoh, some not so great things are happening. We might be invaded. We don't have any protection. Perhaps we should spend some money on a military. So not only do you have to tell me why the kingdom is going to decline, but how we could possibly prevent that. So if you're the old kingdom, hey, vizier, we know these pyramids are really important to you. but growing food is more important. So maybe you should transition some of those people building pyramids into growing more food. Does that make sense? Okay, this is due on Friday. We are not going to work on it at all anymore in class. Thursday, when you get back, we're moving on to the last part, and you'll get assigned those mind maps for Egypt. So please make sure you're making use of your time on Wednesday. I will be here if you have any questions, so feel free to email me if you have questions, and I will be glad to answer anything that you have. All right, questions, anybody?